Let's start our international journey around the world with our next keynote speaker. He is a talent strategist and company culture expert responsible for building world-class teams and companies' culture at some of the more well-respected organizations. He is the founder of Cadigan Talent Ventures. He helps leaders and organizations build compelling talent solutions for today and tomorrow. He has been at the forefront of the global talent strategy for company culture, and most famous for scaling LinkedIn for 400 to 4,000 employees in only 3.5 years. Amazing, isn't it? Having worked in 5 different industries and 3 different countries. He believes that organizations are not machines. They are complex living organisms with their own momentum and their own logic. On behalf of Valkiria Institute for Futures, we welcome Steve Cadigan. We are looking forward to listen to his conference about Discover Your Talent, a strategy for thriving in the new world. Thank you, Steve.
And thank you so much for having me today. It is a real pleasure and a real honor to be here today. And I'm very excited and to have the honor to be the first person to present to you on the portion of talent. What I want to share with you today, coming from my home here in Silicon Valley, are some new ideas and some new thoughts around how we can build a better talent strategy to be more realistic and be more honest with a new future and a new world of work. Even before the pandemic hit all of us, I think we were seeing some very dramatic changes in the future of work. So I want to review some of those with you. I want to tease your brain and tease your mind, and hope you will enjoy the conversation that we have with you today. So I am going to start by sharing some of my slides with you. So I'm going to become very small right now for a little bit, and then I will come back and look forward to sharing more with you. A little bit about my journey, who I am. I believe context matters. When you listen to somebody, where are they from? What's their journey? These are the organizations where I have worked in my life. I started after school working in the fashion industry. I've worked in 5 different industries: fashion, insurance, semiconductor, networking equipment, hardware and software, video game industry, and my last regular job, I was the first head of human resources for LinkedIn during the periods of massive growth in 2009 through 2012. The last 8 to 10 years, I've been doing my own business, working with some very high, exciting organizations around the world, in Europe, in Mexico, in Canada. And today I sit on the board of directors for 3 organizations, all startups growing very, very quickly. And I also consult some pretty big organizations, including Salesforce, Google, Capital One, the BBC, and so forth. So that's a little bit of my journey, but I want to set the context for the kind of world we're living in today. When I was at LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, the chairman and founder, was asked a question one time, which I think captures the reality of the world that we live in today. Reid was asked, "You're building LinkedIn. It's this really strange business model. Like, who is your biggest competitor?" And Reid's answer to me was amazing. Reid said, "I worry more about a company that hasn't even been built yet. My competition doesn't exist. I worry about an organization that can create a new paradigm that can make my model of business obsolete." And this is the world we live in. The future is increasingly uncertain, and things are changing faster than ever before. You feel it, I feel it. Even before the pandemic changed all of our lives, the world of business is the same way. Things are changing quickly, and how we build and think about growing an organization in this uncertain, unpredictable reality is very, very profound, and it's very different. Here is the picture of the biggest, most sold book on leadership in the history of books, okay? The #1 all-time best-selling book on the history of leadership is this book called Built to Last. And the point of this book is, how do we build a 100-year company, a company that will last 100 years? And this was published in the early 90s. And when I think about this book and the relevance of the world today, I wonder how many companies today are really building to survive 100 years? How many companies and how many of you are building a business and you're thinking, I want to last 100 years? How many of you think that's actually realistic? Because I think fewer organizations today are thinking in 100-year terms. I think we're more thinking 1, 2, 3, 5 years as more realistic and more viable. And so I would say if this book were published today, it wouldn't be called Built to Last. It would be called Built to Win Right Now, because that's much more honest, much more realistic. You don't know. As Reed said, I worry about a company, my competition doesn't even exist yet. That's not thinking about 100 years. That's thinking about right now and how hard it is to get up there. The world of work today, wow, it's going through enormous transition. And this book by Bruce Feiler is one of my favorite books that I'm reading right now. He covers a chapter in it where he says the world of work today is in a sustained period of upheaval. There's so many changes going on. That really resonates for me. And if we look at what is exciting and energizing about the world of work is that employees, workers, entrepreneurs, we have more choice, more career choices than ever before in our lifetimes. We can see what's possible, how we can use our skills in new and interesting ways. Now that's unique and that's special. And similarly, organizations have more information about us to make good hiring decisions. So in theory, we have a really interesting situation which has never existed before in the history of business. Both employer and employee have more information to make the best, most intelligent career choices of our lifetimes. That's great, right? That should be a really exciting times. However, we have the most disengaged workforce since we've been measuring engagement. Now, Gallup surveys organizations around the world, and what they're seeing, surprisingly, is that the number of actively disengaged people is rising. So that doesn't make sense to me if you think about it on the surface. In an era where we have more information and more choice about where we can work, how we can use our skills, why are more and more people unhappy, miserable, not feeling engaged at work? This question and this data has driven me probably the last 10 years of my professional life to try to understand what's going on. It's not a simple answer. When I was in Spain before the pandemic back in February, I got together in Madrid with 30 of the top CEOs, okay? People from Telefonica and Salesforce and some very large organizations and Zara. I said, what's your biggest problem? Biggest problem? Can't hire good people and can't keep those good people. So my question was, well, why? And they said, well, the millennials. I said, millennials are the problem? I mean, your children, that's the problem? And then I put it to the CEOs. I said, listen, if it was 30, 40 years ago, and you could see as much career choice as the workforce does today, are you telling me you would still be in your job 35 years later, still be in the same company? No, I don't believe it. And that's one of the reasons why people are changing jobs very, very quickly. Now, this is US data, US labor data, but I believe it trends across the world. And that is people are staying in companies for shorter amounts of time than ever before. In the United States, we've gone from about 5 years to about 4 years in the last 7 years. Okay, that's not that interesting, but this is interesting. If we look at the age demographics, people over age 50 are staying about 10 years. Okay, this is a median, okay, number. And people between the ages of 25 and 35 are staying 2.8 years. What? You're leaving my company? You just got here. We just finished your new hire orientation. And that's the median, which means half of that number is less than 2.8 years. People are leaving companies faster, and nobody believes this trend is going to change. Nobody believes that people in the future will stay at companies longer. Now, this is mostly for-profit enterprises. If you go look at organizations that are in nonprofits, NGOs, people are staying longer. That's different. I'm talking about for-profit enterprises. For the most part here, people are leaving a lot faster. So what's happening? What's going on in the mind of the workforce today? A lot, actually. I think we're seeing a lot of really interesting things. Employees around the world are seeing new business models be created, new unicorns, the Pinterests, the Twitters, the LinkedIns, the Facebooks, the Snaps. And they're also seeing new types of business models, electric cars, home delivery on bicycles, share workspaces at WeWork, Airbnb, Cabify, Uber, using your chromosomes in your DNA to predict your health. They're seeing new organizations deliver new job opportunities and new career paths that never existed before, almost out of nowhere. And this is in less than 20 years, we've seen this happen on a very large scale. And while all that's happening, traditional large businesses are starting to suffer and in some cases die. And in the United States, one of the most traditionally respected businesses, and it's a business that's quoted in almost every business book written in the year 1990 and to 2000, was General Electric. Oh my gosh, great leadership. They have lost more value than almost any company in the world in the last 20 years. They've lost $800 billion of value. And so what that means to me is I think employees are looking around saying, well, where should I go work? What is a good career? What is a safe place for me to work when so much is changing? Should I work for a new startup unicorn? Should I work in a new industry, even though it's unknown and it's a little bit scary? Should I go work for the traditional companies? But wait, they're really suffering. Look what happened in the banking industry in 2008. And since then, it's been really, really tough. So this is creating confusion. It's creating, I believe, some anxiety and some fear. So when I think about why is talent so disengaged, why is turnover so high, I believe it comes down to a few factors. Number one, the old model of work doesn't fit today's reality. It's not honest for us to say, you can have a job here a long time, because nobody believes that anymore. The employers cannot promise long job security because the future is not certain. I can't promise you that I won't have to change your job or your role or let you go when I don't know what's going to happen around the next corner. And similarly, why do organizations expect us, employees, to stay a long time when we have so much choice and you can't make us any promises? Why are you expecting me to stay a long time with you when you can't promise that you're going to keep me a long time? The model of work is broken and it hasn't been replaced with something new and exciting. And in fact, all we hear about the future of work is fear. Worry about the robots, worry about artificial intelligence going to take your job away. And so I think there's a lot of reasons why anxiety is creating. And people, we used to go to school and say, if I study this and I learn this skill, I will have a good career. But today, the value of that information that we learn, the skills we build, don't last us as long. And that's very unsatisfying. It's very disconcerting to a lot of people. And therefore, what we're seeing is a new career model being built. It used to be go to school, we'd work, then we retire maybe in our 60s, boo-boo. Today, we go to school, we learn, we unlearn, we relearn, we work, we learn, we change, we work, we learn, we unlearn, we relearn, we change, we work, and we live a lot longer, so we work a lot longer and we retire later. And this is all evolving now. None of this is certain, right? We're in an era where even what a career means is changing right before our eyes. And I know you feel it in your bones, and maybe you haven't articulated in your mind to say, I really understand what this looks like. But we are humans and we are built to survive. And when we are uncertain about how we're going to survive, it makes us very nervous and stressed out. And the future now is more uncertain than ever, not just for employees, but for employers. And we are scaring the workforce. Oh, you're going to have 12 jobs by the time you're 50. You're going to make a lot of career changes. Many of the jobs in the future for your children don't even exist today. That is not making people feel comfortable, because we're telling them everything's going to be different, but we're not telling them how to prepare for that. We're not helping them understand how to navigate, how to think differently, that what we should be striving for is not security in a company, but security of knowledge. That's one of the big pivots that we're not doing a good job telling the workforce. That job security today is not having a job in one company for a long time. That's not realistic. Job security today is having the knowledge so that even if my job goes away, I can find another job. I can create a job. I can become an entrepreneur. We need to change the language and change the model of work to make it energizing. Because right now, most of what we tell people is run for the hills, your job is toast, the robots are coming. And so what's happening for employees, I'm starting to see this. And I wonder if some of you are already thinking this. We used to believe that safety was staying in one company for a long period of time. Today, that seems to have shifted. That safety is now moving. The more I move and change jobs, the more I learn, the more people I meet, the more my network becomes bigger, the more I have resources, the more I understand how different business models work. I become more valuable when I move. And in an uncertain world, staying in one place makes me vulnerable. It makes me, I think, fragile in an uncertain world. The longer you stay. Now, how quickly did that change? It used to be, well, strength came from loyalty. Strength came from staying in one place. Well, that's just gone now, completely gone. And your capability and your impact is going to be increasingly measured by how agile you are and how adaptable you are. That's why, right here, this is why people are changing jobs. This is why we're seeing a lot of movement, because movement's making people feel more safe. And it didn't used to be that way. It's really fascinating. And now, when I take a look at the employer-employee situation, both parties today have the same problem, which is really, really interesting. Both employers and employees have the same problem. Neither knows what skills they need for tomorrow. Why? Because those skills keep changing. They keep iterating and they're different. So universities today go to corporations and say, what skills should we build? So that you have our students, you hire our students, and the business says, we don't know. True. It's true. And then the employees say, well, what skills should I build to the business? And the business says, I'm not really sure. So what, the answer is, and I get asked this question all the time, whether it's on television or in the print media, Steve, what are the most important skills to build for the future? And my answer is pretty simple. The most important skill for the future is the skill of learning. Yeah. Because if you build your capability to learn quickly, I call it learning agility. If you build the capacity to learn new things, doesn't matter what changes come your way, you have the ability to learn that. Okay. And if you keep chasing a skill and the need for that skill keeps changing, you're never going to find yourself in a place where you feel satisfied. You're always going to be satisfied because as soon as you learn that new skill, you're going to need to unlearn it. And that's going to feel awkward. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Here's a guy, John Seely Brown. He used to be the CEO and CTO of Xerox PARC Research, and in its day, in the 70s and 80s, was hotter than Apple, Google, Facebook combined. The coolest company around. This is where Steve Jobs discovered the mouse, and Bill Gates discovered Windows, apparently. And John Seely Brown, for the last 20 years of his life, is just focused on the future of education. And he believes the value of a skill for us in our work and our careers, and I'm talking mainly technical skills now, the value of technical skills used to be about 50 years, and today it's about 5 or 10. Yeah. Now, this is the world we've created. Like, this is our world. We're accelerating technology and advancing it faster than we're able to build the skills to use that technology. That's the world we've built for ourselves. I don't know that we wanted that, but here's where we are. So let's step back and now answer a more important set of questions. But what does this all mean? Because Steve, you painted a pretty messy world of work right now. So how do we think about recruiting and engaging and inspiring and motivating and building organizations in a messy, uncertain, unpredictable world of work? Well, guess what? I have some good ideas for you. So put on your seatbelt. Well, here, when I think about it, here's an issue that I think is pretty important to first understand. That as leaders building organizations right now, we're facing what I call cognitive dissonance. We used to want to build organizations for stability. That was the goal. Today, we must build for instability. We must build to be able to weather a pandemic, a recession, a new competitor coming out of nowhere. That's our strength. You get it? You only realize predictable success, stability, by being prepared for instability. And that feels a little uncomfortable. But that's the reality of the world of work today. And now, on top of that, the pandemic hits us all. And you've seen as many webinars on the future of work as I have around what the pandemic means, but it's just add another dimension of challenge to us, right? And when I think about where we are as a challenge, I look at the pandemic right now as an opportunity for us to rebuild better. Because when you face a crisis as an organization and as a leader, you have a chance to build followers. You have a chance to earn loyalty because people see what you're made of when things are hard. When things are easy, people don't really know what you're made of. When things are really tough, like they've been for the last year, now we see how you handle it. Now we see, do you have the strength? Do you have the courage? Do you have the wisdom? And do you have true leadership to be able to stand up and shine? And we've seen it, a leadership test in the last year like we've never seen in our lifetimes. We've seen companies and leaders try to take advantage of a crisis and charge more for their products. We've seen leaders and organizations change their factories to build respirators and give it away for free. Look at what Zara's done with their distribution. Unbelievable. So many great examples for us to see. But it's in hard times when you have an opportunity as a leader to really show your team what you're made of. Take advantage of that right now. Take advantage of that. So what everyone's asking me around the world, and I'm sure you're asking yourself that, and I'm asking others the same thing, is, well, what is the best practice right now? We're in a crisis. We've got all this other transition happening in the world of work. What is the best practice today? And I have an answer for you. You ready for it? The best practice today is experimentation. We don't know, are we going to be hybrid? Are we going to be work from home? We have an issue that now we have to think about. All our employees have a different perspective on what safety means, where I feel safe to do my best work. And by the way, the number one driver of high performance on a team is psychological safety. We never had to worry about health like we have to worry now. And people have different versions of what good, safe, healthy work environment looks like. So we're going to have to experiment a lot. We're going to have to listen to our employees. We're going to have to ask them. We're going to have to explore different ways of working to find that way that we can ideally create and innovate and grow our organizations. But there is no best practice yet. And that's up to you. That's up to you to find what the best practice is and to create it and to build something really amazing. So let's talk about a few companies doing some really interesting things. Spotify, up north from where many of you are located in Sweden. Their CEO said in 2019, I'm going to require almost everyone in the company to change jobs every 2 years. He is building in instability in his business model. Do you see that? He is saying not every single person, because it doesn't work. And this model doesn't work in every business, of course, but in his business, many jobs that are somewhat similar, he can move people around and he's doing it. That's a new model. He's also feeding the thirst for people to move and learn. Remember I said earlier, a lot of people feel safety is moving to new jobs. I didn't say it has to be a new company. If you move people to new jobs and you're a big enough organization as Spotify is, and you can move people around, I think they're going to stay longer because they're going to feel more valuable that I'm learning more things. That's an asset that they're taking advantage of. Here's another organization, a marketing firm called Gorilla 76. This is in the United States. Last year, they instituted a program which has never been seen before, as far as I know. When they find out that someone is quitting, they immediately offer that person a 5% raise to stay 3 more months. They say, okay, you're leaving. We're going to give you a raise to stay because we want 3 months to be able to find someone to do your job. They built in a model to pay people to stay longer, to give them a chance to replace that person before they go. That's interesting. That's really interesting. Then what we're also seeing in an era where everyone's talking about the sexy new model is gig, we're seeing organizations that have been around a long time, people are looking at them differently. 3M and Gore, the creator of Gore-Tex, have built in their organizations a project-based world of work where employees bid on different projects and leaders choose who's going to be appropriate to work on that project. It's sort of bringing the gig into the enterprise instead of gig being on the outside, gig on the inside, where instead of people saying, well, I only work in this department, no, you work on projects. And when your project's done, you bid on a different one. Very, very different model of work. It challenges our whole notion of, well, I'm on this team and I work in this organization. No, you're working on projects. Andreessen Horowitz, some of you may have heard of, is one of the most successful venture capital firms just up the road from me here in Silicon Valley. They have a really interesting model to help their portfolio of startups. And they have a team of about 20 people. And their entire job of this team is to connect the leaders in their companies to other smart people, to grow the networks, not to hire people, not to fill open jobs that they have, but they have let's say they have a portfolio company that says, hey, we're thinking of entering into China. Do you know anyone who's entered into China? And the Andreessen person says, yep, I'm going to send you a connection and you're going to get together. And I receive a lot of phone calls from Andreessen Horowitz when they say, hey, we have a portfolio company and they're hiring 200 people this year. You did that at LinkedIn. Can you help our portfolio company? And what's interesting to me is they're using a networking model. We've always known having a good network is valuable, but they are intentionally building networks outside the company. Now, many organizations I work with that are large only build networking inside the company. They don't intentionally build networking and relationships with people outside. That's the future of work right here. And that's what I would always encourage all of you. Have a vibrant network and maybe be active and intentional to build networks for your employees outside your organization where there's a lot of intelligence. Now, LinkedIn, as you know, I mentioned earlier, I spent 4 amazing years of my professional life at LinkedIn. They do something that very few organizations do. When you leave LinkedIn, you don't leave. You're still part of the family. You're still part of the network. I get an email several times a month about a new conference or inviting you for a lunch or come in and speak to our employees or speak to other alumni. The alumni network is very, very tight. And in a world where more people are leaving companies than ever before, the alumni of every organization is growing. If you believe the data, if you believe that more people are leaving companies than ever before, the logic follows and the data follows. You have more ex-employees than you've ever had. What are you doing with those people? Are you engaging them? Are you speaking to them? Are you bringing them to add more value? And by the way, if you do nurture them and engage them, they will come back to you at some point. And even if they don't come back, they will be value add for you in your ecosystem. So let's talk about a model that's existed like that for years. It's the consulting industry. Some of you, all of you are familiar with at least some of these companies: Ernst & Young, Deloitte, McKinsey, BCC, PwC. The model of work for these consulting firms is come work with us and then please leave after 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Their business model is such that when you leave, if you get a better job, they feel good and you feel good. They don't want you to be there a long time. They can charge their clients more when they have younger talents. So they have hiring new grads, grow you, add value, then please get another job. And the better the job you get, the better we look. That model exists out there. I think more and more organizations should start to think like this consulting industry. Super, super interesting. And so I think we need to head to what I call a more evolved, more honest, more high integrity way of thinking about work. Don't promise people job security. Promise them something better. Promise them career security. We have too many leaders today and too many startups and too many corporate organizations that think like this: I only care about you when you work for me. Why? Why don't you care about someone for the whole entirety of their career? Because if you do, maybe they'll come back. If you do, maybe they will be a positive force in the universe for you. That's a better, longer term way of thinking about this. And if you think like this, you don't feel loss when someone decides to leave. You feel, okay, they're going to be in a different part of my universe. They're just not going to work for me directly. I still want to be close to them. That's an evolved way of thinking about the future of work. So what I'm talking about here is thinking about building a new model. And again, like I said, there are no superstar best cases right now. We are in an era of experimentation. I want you to look at all these companies on the outside. A lot of them are highly profitable. Most of them are incredibly valuable. But one very, very interesting fact is I want you to look at the number below the logo. Do you see how short people stay in those organizations? There's only one company on that list that has people staying on average more than 2 years, and that's Facebook. So here we are with an old model of work that says, we want you to stay a long time. The longer you stay, we think the better for you, the better for us. That doesn't work today. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't work. It doesn't need to work that way. And look at how much value they've created in a fluid world of work. Maybe we've overvalued how long someone should stay in our organization. Maybe we've undervalued the power and the energy and the creativity of new people and new ideas, new ways of solving problems, and new ways of innovating. That's powerful. That's very powerful. And so I'm telling you, don't be afraid of people leaving faster. Look at these companies. They're proving you can create huge value when people are leaving faster than they've ever left before. So, okay, wrapping up, I have a few more slides to here and then we'll be finished. But I believe that the companies that win tomorrow have these attributes. You're agile, you're adaptable, you structure your jobs for growth and change. You feed that thirst to learn, and you feed the thirst for doing new things by moving people around more actively. You have cultures of change. Just like these cultures are cultures of change, that's the competitive advantage they have. When crazy hits like the pandemic, did any of these companies suffer? No. Yes, Uber suffered because people weren't taking public transportation as much. But think about that. These companies built a culture of change. When change hit with the pandemic, they did well. In some cases, they did even better. Are you building a culture of change? Or are you building a culture where things need to stay the same? That's a very dangerous path. If you're building for stability, I think you're going to find it's going to be a bad outcome for you. I think you need to build for instability. And I think we need to start thinking more about permeable membranes, people working in our ecosystem, not just for our company. Okay, last point I want to make with you is when we think about talent in the future, we used to value IQ. How smart are you? And then we realized, oh, well, it's not just how smart you are, it's how well do you work with other people. Today, I would argue the most important skill is what I call AQ. And increasingly, we're seeing researchers support this as well. Your adaptability quotient as an organization, as an individual, is what going to define your success. How adaptable are you? And this is the power skill. All the organizations, all the consulting firms you saw on that list earlier, they talk to CEOs around the world and they ask the CEOs, what's the most important skill you need? Agility, adaptability. So I want to close by saying, this is our leadership moment right now. Yes, it feels uncertain, but it's our chance to rebuild better, to create something new, to think of new models of work, to play offense, to not be afraid. Now's the time when you can build loyalty and followership, to rebuild better. I want to just close by letting you know that if you want to contact me, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your reactions. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, if you have more questions, you can find me very easily through LinkedIn. I have a very, very active TikTok channel in my name as well. And I also have a book coming out this summer, which I hope you will consider purchasing and reading. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you so much for engaging me. Thank you for letting me speak in English to most of you that it may not be a first language for, and I look forward to keeping in touch with many of you. Thank you so much.
Brilliant, brilliant insights, Steve. Thank you so much. Thank you for opening our minds to this new dimension about disruptive working world that we should face right now, yeah, because we are in the middle, yeah, of this new working world. Because as you say, we are living in a changing and more insecure world than ever, yeah? So in terms of wise in our professional career, I mean. Let me ask you about, because you know you are passionate about future of work, so let me ask you about the the perspective, the vision of values from future of work perspective, basically are the GPS, yeah, for organizations. But organizations as well, they need to be profitable for their stakeholders. So do you think that a more conscious leadership can lead to a more sustainable businesses?
Absolutely, 100%. Those things are not mutually exclusive. They are realities that can be achieved together. And what beyond just values, I would make it an even bigger question. Having a culture that is meaningful, having an organization that values integrity and honesty and creating a sustainable planet, those things matter more and more to the workforce today. Because if you are playing in that space, you're tapping into meaning for employee. It's not just a job, it's doing good in the world. And increasingly, I believe people today want to find purpose. You know, we understand how fragile we are as human beings. And if I'm going to spend all my time away from my family and friends, I want to make sure I'm using that time to the best possible outcome. And we're seeing more and more organizations really spend, I'm seeing in my business, more organizations spend more time thinking about who are we? And that's what culture is like. Who are you? And why does someone want to work in your organization? And for all the startups out there that are thinking about, we need to create a sense of a mission and purpose and vision and values, I would say ask yourself one question first. Why does anyone want to work for you? When you ask that question, you will find the answers to who you are, your identity, right? We all know this as human beings. When we are young, we don't know who we are. The same is true in organizations. When you're a young organization, you don't really know who you are. And you're going to be adding new members, you're going to be hiring new people. They're going to bring new strengths and new challenges and new ideas. And then you're going to start to get a sense of who you are. But it will always change. And this is the one big mistake, I should say, when people think about values and culture, is they think they have to come up with a clear bound, idea of what that is. And it's impossible because we're organic beings. We're always changing. So, but it's definitely an aspirational track. And I think you can have both is my answer.
Thank you, Steve. I made a question about a reflection that I read in one of your books. Why success in digital economy requires an entirely new talent strategy to attract and retain the best people in your organization?
Yeah, so I mean, that really is something that I feel very, very passionate about. I think I covered it in some of the last points I made in my presentation, which is
Yep.
I think it's more meaningful to have an agreement with your staff that you care about them for the whole of their career. That's just more realistic than just caring about them for the time that they're working for you. I think that's more meaningful. I think doesn't make sense today to try to build a strategy where you're trying to keep people forever. Do I want great people to stay with my organization a long time? Of course I do. Of course you want the best people to stay with us. But the data showing it's not happening all the time. So be prepared. Build a talent strategy that prepares yourself for someone to leave. And find a way, when they do leave, to keep them still close to you. If you love what they do, if you love their ideas, don't just divorce them and never speak to them again. Don't say, you don't like me, you broke up with me, the girlfriend, you don't like me anymore. No, that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is like, okay, how can any company today think they are perfect for someone for that whole life of that person? It's impossible. The company's going to change, the jobs are going to change, the person's going to change. That's not realistic. Build a new model of work that accommodates people will need change and transition. And I think it'll be much more satisfying.
I think Barcelona Startup Congress is a good example of equity and balance, but not all of organizations around the world are a good example of this. What are your thoughts of gender equity, and is it the right goal, and how do we achieve it in cultural organizations?
Well, I look at gender equity under the umbrella of something bigger and as meaningful and perhaps even more meaningful, and that really is diversity. If you want to build a great company, you need to have diverse ideas and perspectives, not just from gender equity, but from racial equity, from age diversity, from national origin, from education diversity, people, maybe folks who served in the military, ex-veterans, like there is a whole big universe. Yes, is the conversation today focused a lot on race and gender? It is. But those are just two of a huge ocean of diversity that is important to commit to if you want to realize success today. Let's take a look at what's happened during the pandemic, which is really interesting. More women than men have lost jobs. Many women who have small children who had to school at home had an extra burden of stress, whether it's fair or unfair, it happened. And the other interesting thing, and I saw a report on this yesterday, is that a lot of retail money is usually spent by women more than men. So that money is now, people spending that money has been impacted. And that's another sort of like psychological factor that a lot of organizations fail to consider. So I think the point I made earlier in the presentation around this is a chance for us to rebuild better. And now's a chance to tackle very big, very hard things like gender diversity. And I will say this, I don't know many companies that have done extremely well in this. I don't. And you know that, I mean, Spain has a different, perspective on gender diversity as, say, the United States or Canada. Like every country, in some cases every region, have different perspectives on gender diversity and inclusion. So that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge for a lot of organizations. I think it's worth solving, but I think we have to recognize this is a really hard problem, a really hard problem. And whenever you go, and I work with a lot of recruiters around the world, and when you tell a recruiter, we need to hire 60% women and only 40% men, and that recruiter's a man, how do you think that recruiter feels? That recruiter is concerned. Like, if you elevate somebody, we need to hire more of this, somebody's going to feel like I'm going to get less. So you're going to possibly see resistance. So I think we need to have a more honest conversation around gender diversity and recognize it's a really hard problem to solve.
Yeah, you are right, Steve. We can feel it here in Spain as well. Organizations are more and more conscious about this equity and this balance, in their teams and in their talent. Just, before finishing, Steve, can you share your next projects? And going through your website, I've seen you have a very interesting workshop. Can you tell us about this?
Sure. I really love to spend time with organizations that want to really think about their talent strategy differently. So I teased you with some ideas today, but I love to come in and speak with people, small teams, big teams around, let's think differently around the world of work and how we can build something more creative and more fun together. What's on my table right now is, as I mentioned very briefly at the end, I have a book coming out this summer. I'm in negotiations with a publisher to have it translated into Spanish. I'm very excited. And many of the ideas that I covered today are covered in the book in even more detail with lots more examples. So that's the big, it's the big life project for me. I've been thinking about this book for about 10 years. And I finally, during the pandemic, I finished it during the pandemic.
And hopefully,
and I'm also trying,
sorry, just go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, I just, and again, I'm just super grateful to be here and to have a chance to share my ideas. And thank you so much again for the invitation.
No, thanks to you. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And hopefully you can present your book here in Barcelona with us. So thank you so much, Steve. It's been a great pleasure. And well, we hope to have you soon here in our ecosystem and, listening to all your inspirational insights. Thank you and take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.